Welcome to the 8th episode of our series from Exodus. In a football match, if someone is playing very badly, or if they need a rest, or if they get injured, the manager can use a substitute. The substitute is another player. The substitute comes onto the pitch to play in the match instead of the player who was playing badly. At school, sometimes if a teacher is ill and can't come to school, then they need someone to teach their lessons instead of them. They need a substitute. The school arranges for another teacher to come in to teach instead of the teacher who is ill. The teacher is sometimes called a substitute teacher. Both of these examples show us what a substitute is. A substitute is when something takes the place of something else. This is very important to understand because today our story from Exodus is all about a substitute. Listen carefully because this story is one of the most important stories in the Bible. We're going to hear about Passover. Last week, we heard about the first 9 plagues on Egypt. Yahweh sent frogs and gnats and boils and darkness and more against Pharaoh and the Egyptians. All 9 plagues are like God saying with a megaphone, "I am Yahweh, there is no one greater than Yahweh." Now we're going to hear about the last plague, plague number 10. Listen to what it says in the Bible about the last plague. I'm going to read Exodus chapter 11, verses 4 to 6. So Moses says, "This is what Yahweh says. About midnight I will go throughout Egypt. Every firstborn son in Egypt will die, from the firstborn son of Pharaoh, who sits on the throne, to the firstborn son of the female slave, who is at her handmill, and all the firstborn of the cattle as well. There will be loud wailing throughout Egypt, worse than there ever has been or ever will be again." This was God's judgment. He was angry with Pharaoh and the Egyptians. Yahweh wanted to show the whole world what he was like. You cannot go against him and get away with it. In this last plague, even the Israelites were in danger of Yahweh's judgment. But Yahweh provides a way for all of the Israelites to be kept safe from this judgment. Yahweh tells them how to be safe. It's all to do with a substitute. Every Israelite family needed to get a lamb. This lamb had to have nothing wrong with it at all. This lamb was going to be the substitute. Listen to what they had to do. I'm going to read Exodus chapter 12, verses 6 to 7. "Take care of them until the 14th day of the month, when all the members of the community of Israel must slaughter them at twilight. Then they are to take some of the blood and put it on the sides and tops of the door frames of the houses where they eat the lambs." Every Israelite family had to kill the lamb and paint its blood over the door to their house. The blood was a sign that there had already been a death in the house. Listen to what will happen on the night of this last plague. This is Exodus chapter 12, verses 12 to 13. "On that same night I will pass through Egypt and strike down every firstborn of both people and animals, and I will bring judgment on all the gods of Egypt. I am Yahweh. The blood will be a sign for you on the houses where you are, and when I see the blood, I will pass over you. No destructive plague will touch you when I strike Egypt." The angel of death killed the firstborn son in every house where there was no blood on the doorframe. But if the angel of death saw blood on the doorframe of the house, then he would know that a death had already passed. the lamb had died as a substitute instead of their firstborn son. For every other house in Egypt, the houses that didn't have blood around their doorframes, the firstborn son in the house died. From the firstborn son of the slave to the firstborn son of Pharaoh. Yes, that's right. Even Pharaoh's firstborn son died. Pharaoh had refused to let God's people go, and so God had brought judgment on Pharaoh and the Egyptians. Listen to what happened next. This is verse 31. During the night, Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and said, "Up, leave my people, you and the Israelites. Go, worship Yahweh as you have requested." Finally, Pharaoh let God's people go, just as Yahweh promised. God's people finally left Egypt. In the last plague, it's like Yahweh says to the world, "I am Yahweh. You can be saved from my judgment only through the blood of a substitute." The Passover is a true story of something that really happened. Yet the Passover is also a picture that helps us understand something else, something that happened later in the Bible. The Passover is a picture of what happened when Jesus died on the cross. It's a picture of the gospel, the good news from God. Here's how it works for us. The danger for us is not that the angel of death is coming to kill the firstborn son in every house, but instead, because we have all turned away from God in our heart, God has said that we all deserve to be punished. We all deserve to be punished by death. However, just like with the Passover, God has provided a substitute for his people. God has provided someone to take their place. This time, it is not a lamb who is the substitute. Instead, it is a person, Jesus. When Jesus died on the cross, he died instead of sinful people like us. He died as a substitute. When we first turn from sin and trust in Jesus, then we are safe from God's punishment. We will never be punished by God for our sin because Jesus has already taken the punishment when he died on the cross. This time, it is not trusting in the blood of the Lamb which keep God's people safe. It's trusting in the blood of an even better substitute, Jesus. This is why Jesus is sometimes known as the Lamb of God. Listen to what someone in John's Gospel says about Jesus. "Look, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world." Everyone today who does not trust in Jesus' death on the cross is like the Egyptians on the night of the Passover. You might feel okay. You might think you are a good person. But there is no blood on the doorframe of your house. You are in danger, even if you don't realize it. Yahweh promises that you can only be saved from his judgment by the blood of a substitute. When we first turn from sin and trust in Jesus, it's like Jesus' blood has been painted over us. Only then are we safe. Only then have we switched sides. Everyone today who does trust in Jesus' death on the cross is like the Israelites on the night of the Passover. There is already blood on your doorframe. It's Jesus' blood. You are safe. Jesus is your substitute. This is why it is so important to keep trusting in Jesus. Let's thank Yahweh that he saves everyone who trusts in Jesus the substitute. Next time, we will hear more about Yahweh's amazing rescue. See you then.